Afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first Stack Bite Size. My name's Matt Jones. I'm the content platform specialist at Cuba, and I'm joined by Ben Franklin, who's our technical director. So what is Stack Bite Size? Let me just the screen. Yeah, so what is Stack Bite Size? Well, Stack Bite Size is a session of 15 minutes where we explore some of the key issues affecting businesses when it comes to web technology, UX and design. This is followed by a 15-minute Q&A where it's your chance to ask questions and quiz us on that particular subject matter. So without further delay, I'm going to get straight into the first one, which is Headless in 15 minutes, revolutionizing content management. So I'm going to start with a very brief history lesson. What is the evolution of the content management system? Where did it start? Well, if we look back to the mid 1990s, websites were built in HTML, and this presented a number of problems for businesses because any changes had to be done by the web agency or more likely their IT firm. And this obviously slowed the whole process down, and it was very costly. So we saw, around about late 90s, early 2000s, the advent of the content management system. And these were fairly basic affairs when they first came out. They were generally developed by agencies themselves. They were form-based, and they didn't offer a lot of control. But it was a step forward from, obviously, what we'd had previously. Moving on from there, we saw the advent of the content platform vendor, and this really moved content management systems forward quite a lot, and it added a lot of benefits. And we saw things like, for example, WYSIWYG editors, so that you could actually go in and edit the page and change layouts, etc. We saw the advent of APIs, and later in the kind of life cycle of this, we saw digital experience platforms, DXPs, and these were the kind of all singing, all dancing systems that allowed you to go in and not just manage the content, but also manage the marketing aspects of your website. If we fast forward from there, we saw the emergence of Headless, and this has been around for quite a while, but it's really got a lot of traction in sort of recent times, and I think it's it's the hot topic of the moment. It's fair to say. So you probably heard this term headless, and I'm sure some of you are already familiar with it, but some of you may not be. So I'm just going to briefly give a definition of what it is, and then we're going to go and look at some of the benefits of it. So what is headless? Well, essentially, headless is a way of separating the content of the content management system from the way it's displayed. And this is probably best illustrated by comparing it to a traditional CMS. So in a traditional CMS, the content management and the front end are all built into one system, and that communicates with the database where the data is stored. And then it pushes that out to the user, typically desktop and mobile and tablet, that type of thing. With a headless CMS, it's slightly different. So you still got the database, but the content management system is just about managing that content, nothing more. And what it does is it uses an API to communicate with the front end. And that has a number of advantages over the traditional CMS when it comes to some of the points we're going to discuss shortly. So let's have a look at the benefits. Well, let's focus on the first one, which is you as a client and how it benefits you. Well, if you compare a headless CMS to, say, a DXP, a digital experience platform, it's a lot simpler to use. And this is quite important when it comes to larger teams. If you've got a small team and everyone's trained to use that particular system, that's fine. But where you've got maybe a higher turnover of editors and you've got a lot of people using it, it actually can be quite difficult to actually keep everyone trained on a complex system. And the headless systems are generally a lot easier. Another advantage is you're not paying for features you don't use. You're only paying for the content management elements of it. And that allows you to integrate with your preferred tools. And there's certain advantages there, which we'll come on to talk about. Another benefit is omnichannel delivery. It's future-proofed for the next generation of devices. So what do we mean by omnichannel? Well, it's smart watches, appliance, smart voice, voice devices such as Alexa, smart devices and appliances, that type of thing. It might not be something you need now, but obviously later down the line, it might become an issue that you need to address. Another significant benefit, and probably one of the most important, is its scalability and performance. Headless CMS systems are SaaS-based, so it's a software service-based model, and that means that you're only paying for what you use, and it can scale and grow with you. So if you have a particular burst of traffic due to some sort of event or something, it handles that very well. Whereas with the traditional CMS platforms, to some extent, that's not the case, and you have to plan for your host infrastructure to a greater degree. Another key benefit really is that upgrades become a thing of the past, because it is a SaaS-based model. Everything's all encompassed into one system. There's also some security benefits. So there's the reduced risk of SQL injection and cross-site scripting, that type of thing. But probably the most important one is that there's a faster response by the software vendors themselves when a problem is identified. So with a traditional CMS, the typical kind of scenario is that, if a security threat is identified, a patch is issued, and that takes time. You've got to create that, you've got to get that patch out to your agencies, they've got to implement it, and that can take weeks, or in some cases months, to do. With the headless solution, because it's SaaS based, it can be fixed on the fly very quickly. Another benefit is the choice of front-end technologies. So you're not tied to one particular type of technology. So this allows for more creativity. And it also means that you're not tied to one agency offering one technology. You can kind of shop around and get the best service that you want from that particular agency. I think it's only fair to kind of give the balanced view on this and give you some of the disadvantages, and there are a few. Probably the most significant is investment. It's the kind of elephant in the room, and yes, they do cost more. Well, that's not entirely true, but when you're comparing to, say, a DXP platform, they're probably comparable in cost. But certainly if you're on one of the open source solutions such as Umbraco, where there's no license cost, then you're probably thinking to yourself, well, why would you want to spend all that money on a headless solution that's going to cost you, significantly more? Well, the key thing here is to kind of look at the investment overall, rather than just specifically what the headline license cost is, because there are savings to be made. So there's obviously the reduced hosting cost, you're saving on that. There are still hosting costs associated with Headless, because you still need to host the front end, but they are reduced. And then there's also obviously the other thing is the fact that you're not going to have to fork out on expensive upgrades as the software's upgrade, as the traditional systems are upgraded, or the hot fixes that I mentioned earlier. Another one is editing control. So if you're familiar with traditional systems where you've had a WYSIWYG editor and you've had a lot of control over layout, etc., that side of things, it doesn't offer that level of control, because obviously it is about separating content from the way it's displayed. It does offer some control. The better systems out there, and the ones we work with, have content blocks which you can go in and reorder. You can obviously change text, images, upload videos, that type of thing. But it's certainly not the WYSIWYG control that maybe some people are used to. And then finally is integration. Now, really, to get the best out of a headless CMS, you need to integrate it. It is essentially just a way of managing and storing content. So unlike a DXP, where all of those features are built in, it just focuses on one thing, but it does it very well. But that does present its own opportunity, and really that's about composability. And I'm going to hand over to Ben now, who's just going to talk you through that.
Cheers, Matt. Yeah, thank you. So just stepping maybe a level above Headless for the moment. So Headless is only one part of a bigger system. So this diagram is basically just showing that past systems were classed as monolithic. So what that really means is you've got one massive system that has everything inside it, and it's a bit of a black box. So you might have a marketing suite in it, you might have email in there, anything really, alongside your CMS. It's all one thing, and it's hard to separate anything out. Whereas we're coming now to this, well, it's got a new term, but it's not a new way of thinking. It's composable. So all that really means is using modules to do certain things. So the idea behind it is that you basically buy the best thing you can afford for the function you want to do. So Headless is one part of that, so a headless platform for your content. But if you want a marketing suite, you can bolt that in, buy the best one you can afford. If you want something else, like an e-commerce platform, buy the best one you can afford, and you bolt them together. And where tech is going now is that you don't have all these disparate systems that don't understand each other. They actually link together because they are built in an API first way, so they all know how each other work, and there's no sort of problems there. If you go on to the next slide, Matt, please. This is just a way of showing that, really, with a classic sort of RV that you might find in America, where it has everything inside it. It's quite hard to change anything, though, whereas on the right-hand side, you've got an example where you've got things that bolt together. The other examples might be like a hi-fi. I don't know if people have those anymore, but in the old days when you would have hi-fi, you would buy the separates, like the amp, the CD player, all that kind of stuff, and bolt them together. And then you could replace them without worrying about the rest. So that's just a bit of an analogy, really, to explain the difference between monolithic and composable. On the next one, Matt. So we just thought we'd put in an example of where we're actually doing this at the moment and why they decided to go it. So you may have seen press release recently that we've been working with Birmingham Airport that will be going live sort of mid next year. They have been on for a number of years a monolithic system. It's super inflexible. They are unable to change things themselves. They have to go back to their agency most of the time to change even the smallest thing. It also has many security issues inside of it. So they weren't happy. So they came to us. The important thing to say is that we didn't just go down the headless route, because headless isn't right for everyone. We're talking about it in this webinar, but it's not the solution that everyone should go with. It's important to be informed. So we obviously did a selection process by gathering their requirements, understanding what they needed, and then deciding. And we put forward the fact that headless would be better for them for a number of reasons. One reason is, Matt's already touched on omnichannel, but they've got multiple places they want to put content, and in the future they're talking about further places that they want to put content. So a simple example is that they have multiple microsites that they want to put content to, and you can manage all of that in one place. A more interesting example would be maps within the airport themselves that will be managed from the system, but also like live screens which show flight information, things like that. So all this kind of stuff can be managed from one headless platform without having to worry about where the content is stored, and you can change the front end whenever. As I mentioned, their current site is really insecure, and they had lots of issues with DDoS attacks and things like that. By moving to headless, you leverage the power of the headless provider, and because it's SaaS-based, you don't have to worry about that anymore. And all these things made Birmingham decide, yes, this is the right choice, and they went with headless as we suggested. And if you go on to the next screen, Matt, we were also talking to them about how you migrate content. So this is one of the biggest things I think anyone has to look at, even if you're moving from traditional to traditional CMS, particularly to a headless CMS. How you're going to migrate your content across, because generally the content will be in different format, because you're separating the design element from the content, you can format it in a different way. You can store it in a different way. So you need to understand how much content have you got now, and how much do you want to move into that? What are you going to get rid of? What are you going to keep? The SEO considerations, generally, it would be in a different format on a headless system. So understand that. And also, how much can you automate? We generally try and go for 80-20 rule, where we can automate 80% of the content across using tools that we already have. But there's always going to be that manual massaging of content that you need. So these are all important things that you need to think about, and we can obviously help you with. But content first is what you should think about, and then platform second, and then Matt, the next one. And we've just put a few platforms in that we use and that sort of leaders in the market. Birmingham have gone with Contentful. Obviously, they're all really good. So any questions about that, do let me know. Back to you, Matt, I think.
Thanks, Ben. So just quickly to recap on what the takeaways are. So the first thing really is to look at your long-term goals when considering Headless. Don't just look at what you need now, but what you're going to need in the future. When it comes to investment, it's a case of looking at the bigger picture in terms of the investment over the life of the website rather than the immediate investment. Because if you look at Headless as it stands on just based on license cost, yes, it can come out more expensive, but there are savings to be made. Omnichannel, do you need omnichannel? You might not need it now, but it's something to think about, for the future. Scalability, Headless offers a lot more flexibility when it comes to scalability. That's a big consideration for many organizations. And then just finally, to do your due diligence on the platform selection. There's a lot of platforms out there. I mean, Ben's just touched on a few that are our particular favorites based on the research that we've done. Not saying necessarily they are the best, but certainly Contentful and Content Stack are market leaders, and they are so for a reason. So whatever you decide to do in that area, make sure that you've done your research and it does fit your needs. So that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much for sitting through that, and I'm going to take some questions now, hopefully.
There's one in the chat that I can take, which is asking, is it better as a developer, is it more efficient to work on the traditional, as in, is it more cost effective? In terms of, is it more efficient? I would say yes, for a couple of reasons. So all our developers at Cuba are full stack developers, which means they can work on the front end and the back end. But where Headless has an advantage is that you can completely separate that out. So you can do it in parallel. So you can have someone working on the front end, which would be HTML, CSS in a framework like Matt showed earlier, such as Node or Versal or whatever you want to use. You can run that, you can have a developer working on that, and you can have a developer working on the back end at the same time in isolation, and then they easily join together. Whereas with a more traditional one, you need to do the front end generally first. You can kind of do it inline sometimes, but you still need to have that time afterwards where you rebuild it all in the views or whatever you need within the traditional CMS. So generally it will be quicker, which does make it more cost effective from a development point of view. In terms of license costs, Matt's already picked up on that, that it can be more expensive, but from a purely developing it day to day, generally it should be quicker. I could probably pick up on that one from Leon as well. He said, what are the key differences between the platforms mentioned here? There's one difference would definitely be cost. They have a different price point on each one of them. Some of them are cheaper than others. Also, it's about the systems that they connect with. I'm not really going to single one out for another. That isn't really the point of this, to say one's better than the other. But I think if you looked on the websites for the different platforms, you'll see that some have integrations already with a lot of big players, such as, say, Salesforce or SAP, stuff like that, and some don't. So some I would class as more lightweight. They're just a content platform, and if you want to integrate anything, you have to do it yourself. Whereas others are already there, ready to go. I'd also say that some of them on the list we've sent, I mean, there's only 4. There's more than that, but on those ones, some of them are also more enterprise level, so they're built to scale, whereas other ones maybe are not. But I'm happy to take that into a different conversation because I don't really want to be saying one is better than the other. That's what our process of choosing platforms is for, really.
Do you want to go pick up on the next one, Ben? I think that's probably for you, isn't it? About front end, whether you still need a.
Yeah, so that's from Luca asking
Okay.
how the front end integrates with the content platform. So to summarize, they are completely separate entities now. So the Headless platform that you choose is, as Matt said, basically a content repository, and you can structure it as you wish. For example, in Contentful, you define content types, and then it's not really like pages, it's content types, and then you can join them together. And then the front end, you can build it in whatever you want. So imagine you had like a static site. You can just build that in HTML or Node or Vue or any sort of front end framework you want. And then you hook the two together via an API. So the Headless platform has an API that exposes all of the content that you've added to it. And then you choose where you want to show that on the front end. So you can use it to build up pages, build up the sitemap, build up the navigation, etc. An important point about that, though, is you don't want to be calling the API on every call. So we work to heavily cache that content because that's what makes the performance better. The idea of having a headless CMS separating it is more high performing because you don't need to be calling the CMS every time. So I can, if afterwards, if you want to get in contact, I can send you some diagrams of how that works and fits together. It might explain it better.
There's one from AJ. I think I'll pick up on Ben if that's right. So will Headless become the de facto standard? If so, will costs reduce over time? I mean, it's a good question, AJ. I think certainly, I mean, we're seeing a lot more traction with Headless now. I don't think the traditional CMS is going to disappear anytime soon, but I think costs are becoming more competitive. We're certainly seeing much more competition between the headless vendors, and they're very keenly pricing to win the business. So, you know, the headline figures that they publish and what our clients are actually paying is actually there's a fair saving there. So yeah, I think that is a case that we'll certainly see some reduction in that.
I'll pick up on the next one from Leon, who's asking how will Birmingham be using it for their in-terminal flight information. So that is currently a phase 2, so it won't be for launch. But the reason they've gone down the headless route, as mentioned, is because they know they want to do things like that in the future. Without going too much into the runnings of their business, they've got some screens that they purchased fairly recently that they're not using to their full potential. And it's got some on-premise hardware, basically, that we'll be integrating with. So that isn't a integration that is already available. That's one that we were building, but it isn't for this phase. But I'm happy to discuss that in more detail on another call, Leon. We can certainly do that. Next one.
Can I pick up on that one, Ben?
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
Ronke, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If a business wanted to migrate using Headless from traditional CMS, how easy, difficult would this process be? What kind of benefits could that change offer? I think in terms of the migration, that's a lot of that is down to the complexity of your existing system. You know, what platform it's on, the kind of level of content. Content is always one of the key things when it comes to migration and getting that across, and that can be probably one of the bigger challenges, I think. what kind of benefits would that offer? But I think again that comes back to what your objectives are for selecting Headless. So I think it's important, as I hope it came across in the presentation, that it's not just a case of going for Headless because it's the next thing or whatever. There's got to be some rationale behind your decision to do that. So you need omni-channel delivery, or you want that kind of more streamlined approach. You want to benefit from integration with your third-party systems, using best of breed of each software system out there. So I think that's what you need to really keep in mind when making that decision. I've got a couple of questions that have come in via message in LinkedIn. There's one probably for you here, Ben. Here we go. What are the primary security considerations when implementing a headless CMS, and how does this compare to traditional systems in terms of data protection?
I think that they're actually the same to any system. They're not any different. So the primary considerations are: does it protect against DDoS? Can you protect against SQL injection? Do you have authentication? They're no different. I think the difference or the advantage that you have is that a lot of it is leveraged by the provider, so you don't have to worry about pen testing the CMS or pen testing the logins and all that, because that is provided for you by the CMS. You don't have to worry about that. And generally on the front end, because you're running much leaner front end, whether you're running it in, like I said, Vue or Node.js or something, there aren't as many points that can be there for hackers to get into. So it's generally more secure because it's more locked down in that sense. From a compliance point of view, again, it's literally the same, because if you're taking data, the rules are the same, and you have to think about that. The only thing I would say is that if your organization has rules about where your data resides, such as the UK or the EU, then that would be a consideration for the platform you choose, because not all of them allow or offer your data to be hosted in the EU or UK, or even if they do, it may be routed through America, for example. So just that's something to bear in mind, and that's something we look at when we're doing a platform selection. And then I'll just see the next, skipped a question. I've skipped one, and then I'll come back to yours then. There's a question about multilingual. How would this work when you have a multilingual website? So again, that's something to check for in the platform. So not all of them offer that out of the box yet, but some certainly do. So Content4 Content Stack, for example, do offer that out of the box, and you can do multilingual content within the platform itself. And then on the front end, it would just be the same. So you would choose how you wanted to serve that to the customer or the user, depending on your SEO implementation, whether you're using subdomains or channels, etc. And then basically you just choose the API will return the content that you request. So if you want it in German or French or whatever, you request it using that locale, and it will send that back to you. So it works in the same way as now. There's just a bit more configuration on the front end to make sure you're pulling back the correct content.
I think we're almost there on time. I think just as a comment from Leon, if you want to pick up on that, Ben.
Yeah, so just reading that. Yes, that is certainly challenging. I know you had that challenge on yours, and it's similar on Birmingham. Yes, it is a challenge. I suppose with a monolithic CMS, there's also that challenge that you would have to buy a license as well. It's definitely can be more expensive and longer to get up and running, because composable by its nature means that you have more systems. So as you found, Leon, you have to talk to more vendors to be able to get the systems to hook together. The hope is, though, that in the long run, because you've got the best of breed systems, you don't then have to do as much maintenance, spend as much money on it. It's ready to go. And yeah, the search being e-commerce focused, I agree with you there. I don't really have anything to comment on that. They are focusing on e-commerce at the moment. I'm hopeful that they will switch around and maybe do it more on websites. I would say that Algolia, as an example, is very good with doing websites and not just e-commerce.
Lovely. Well, thanks, Ben, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you've found that session really helpful, and we'll keep you posted on the next updates with Stack Bite Size. Thank you very much.